In March 2023, that's just 6 months ago, just take you back to that time. Back in the news, you were hearing a lot about the layoffs. And we got this group back together, plus Zach Chertok, who you would hear from later at this conference. Then we talked about hiring in times of layoffs. The panel shared their outlook for the year, and 6 months later, today, we are catching up with them to hear about how their hiring expectations compare to what actually happened and what worked, what did not work. Back then, Kelly said it's going to be a very interesting year. And Trent Cotton described the situation as a green stoplight. You didn't know what's going on. I'm going to start the first question to set the stage and help you understand the background of these great leaders here. So I'm going to ask all panelists, and let's start with Rob. We want you to provide a brief overview of your company, your annual hiring volume, and type of hires and geography, please.
Great. Thanks very much, Lemez, and hello, everyone. Nice to be here with you all. So as Jason mentioned, I am the Global Head of Recruitment for WTW, Willis Towers Watson. You might have heard of us here in Chicago because there's the Willis Tower, and that's our company. So we have a global footprint, and as Jason mentioned, I'm responsible for recruiting across the globe, and we do approximately 10,000 hires. Insurance, broking, human capital management, operations, technology, you name it, high volume recruiting, contact center. And we actually have partnerships with 4 different RPOs across the world.
Thanks, Kelly.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kelly Burlage. I work for Lineage Logistics, one of the largest companies no one knows about. If you have consumed, or our tagline is, if you've consumed, I'm not even getting it right. We move and store food. 40% of the calories that you consume on a daily basis come from Lineage Logistics. So fun fact for the day, you're welcome for feeding you. I have nothing to do with that. And globally, we have 441 locations that I'm responsible for, that my team is responsible for, I should say. Over 25,000 hires we're expected to do this year, which is a lot more than we had planned to do. And we are currently in Europe, we're in Asia Pacific, and across North America.
Hello, Trent Cotton. So I'm the little guy on the stage. We don't hire as many as that, thank God. I used to, but I don't do it anymore, and I kind of like being at that lower level. So we hire in LATAM and the US. We build technology solutions for companies like AT&T, Charter, Cox, kind of an outsourcing. They give us the entire project. We staff it, hand it back off to them. So the bulk of our team is in Latin America, which is a lot of fun for me because I like the LATAM culture. We don't do anything in Eastern Europe or India, which is great because I know French and I know English, and I'm trying to learn Spanish. I don't need to add any more languages to the pot, right?
Excellent. So you can see there's a diverse panel, which I love. It's diverse in terms of the verticals they hire in, as well as the different size company and hiring experiences. I'm curious, since we met last time, how did this year economic and labor market conditions impacted your hiring?
Well, I feel like 6 months ago, I was cautiously optimistic that I didn't know what was coming. What changed in our market was we focused on moments that matter. So we really took a different approach of thinking about what the employee wanted, and really realized with the word around the Great Resignation, which, can we please retire that word, and really focused on the notion of the Great Reshuffle and trying to think about what it was the candidates were looking for. So I think 6 months ago, we re-engineered and retooled our brains to get, how are we going to get ahead of what was happening in the market, and how are we going to approach it more from an employee mindset versus what we saw maybe 2 years ago, where the candidates weren't necessarily in the driver's seat of labor activity.
So listening to Danielle, listening to Ben earlier, do you feel anything they mentioned that you relate with in terms of what actually unfolded?
Yes, it gives me a little bit of PTSD, actually. Yes, I mean, compensation ranges leveled out. The labor shortage was a real issue for us. Supply and demand was like nothing we'd ever seen. Every one of our competitors, we'd pay $17, somebody across the street would pay 18, we'd pay 18, they'd pay 19, so on and so forth. So that was a constant issue for us and an obstacle that we had to work through. Supply and demand continues to be a struggle. I mean, I think Daniel mentioned a lot of statistics that are very real for us in terms of competition, where we're hiring. Inflation played a big part of that, the competition of others coming into the market, which we hadn't seen before. People were shifting positions. I think one of the stats that Daniel talked about was the great reshuffle, right, which essentially means the number of requisitions that were being filled and the people that were moving in and out of those positions superseded one another. And we saw that. So retention became the number one focus for us last year, and I would say over the last 6 months, versus I would say we played much more of an offensive strategy versus a defensive strategy, which put us in a much better position globally. Did that help?
Yes. So I'll move it to Trent. Well, you get the chance to chime in.
So she cheated. She read my notes. I agree. And actually, let's retire great resignation. I actually like great reskilling. I think that's really what presents us now. And that's what we've been focused on. I wrote a piece about it not too long ago, just some of the statistics of just Gen AI. Let's talk about generative AI. That was something we were not talking about 6 months. We were talking about it, but I don't think that we were ready for the sucker punch in the face that most of us are facing now. I'm in the tech world, so we are obsessed with that, but a lot of our clients are also coming to us going, we've got all these old systems, we need to do Gen AI, and they don't even know what the hell Gen AI is. But LinkedIn, I think last week, released a scary statistic. 85% of the users on LinkedIn, 25% of their job will be aggregated out to AI over the next 5 years. Just let that kind of sink in. So if I'm in an RPO's shoes, or for us, we provide talent strategy. I was really excited. I had all these great statistics, and then Daniel spoke. So it was like bringing a knife to a gunfight. So I'm not going to go any of the stuff that he went over, but we provide that to our clients because they don't know what they don't know. And so now we're going to them and saying, you've got to reskill your team. That is an absolute must. And I think that's going to be, going into 2024, I think that's going to be something that companies, or the good ones, are already in it. Google made this shift in 2018. Amazon made this shift back in 2012. Look at where they are now. The rest of the economy is trying to catch up with it. So I think that the companies that embrace that and look at the great reskilling are going to be the ones that are ahead, and the ones that just say, Gen AI is a fad. Well, so is the internet.
So I want to take it back to Rob, and because of your global hiring as well, I do want to hear about how the economic conditions impacted your global hiring.
Sure. I would say it's impacted us in a positive way, actually, because one of the things that I'm responsible for right now, as I mentioned, I'm heading up the transformation efforts for our recruiting program. And we're doing a lot of scaling up in some of our markets like Asia, India, Manila, Lisbon, and Mexico City. And so the labor market changed. I mean, we talked about, you all saying, the great resignation reshuffle. So we had a lot of resignations. And instead of hiring in these markets, we actually hired now in our lower cost markets, India, Manila, Mexico, and Lisbon. So it's helped us in that regard. But each market is a little bit different. It remains competitive for technology in India. We have a lot of competitors out there who are still looking. But if I think about software developers as an example, we had that high dropout rate, about 38% of the offers that we made that got accepted, they just would never show up on day one. candidates were receiving anywhere between 10 to 13 offers, I was hearing at one point. And so these days, it is still very competitive, but maybe now they're getting 3 to 5 offers. We've maybe just managed to reduce that dropout rate down to around 30%, and locally, it's still around 50% in India. So we've benefited from it, that change, and so we are actually ahead of plan from our transformation perspective.
Good to hear the good news. And Kelly, you also mentioned that your actual hiring exceeded what you expected this year. So I'm curious to your hiring strategy in particular. Did you find that you had to pivot from what you originally planned, or did your hiring strategy actually work for you? And what, if you want to elaborate in that as well?
Have any of you heard of John Foley or seen John Foley speak? He's the former Blue Angels pilot. He talks a lot about speed wins. If you haven't, he's an incredible speaker. He produces 162 slides in less than 58 minutes, and his whole concept is around speed wins. And he came to speak with us about the whole notion of speed. And you balance speed and quality. How do you manage quality of hire with getting candidates through the process and having them have a great experience, which is a delicate balance. I was speaking to John earlier today. He was talking about a company that leverages a technology that can get X amount of candidates hired within 55 minutes. And I said, do they talk to the people? Does anyone have a conversation with anyone? So we took an approach of having a very differentiated approach where speed was the cornerstone of everything we did. However, it was a very high-touch experience. So as an example, we just orchestrated the first ever global hiring day across our organization where we filled almost all of our positions. Now, again, they're all open again today, but almost all of our positions in one single day of an event. And the reason it works is because candidates are meeting you, they're coming in for a realistic job preview, they're seeing who they're going to be working with, they're going through a location and freezing and seeing what it's like to work in these facilities. They're coming to the corporate headquarters, seeing how everyone is treated, and seeing what a day in the life would look like for them. So for us, we approached it in a very differentiated path. We had, at any given time, 10 different lines in the water fishing. So we have our recruitment marketing plans going. We have our EVPs and our employee testimonials going where candidates are getting excited. We also leveraged persona-based recruiting. So I'm at a point in my career where mission-driven organizations that are doing really good things are really important to me because I want my kids to be proud of what I'm doing. And so we focused on certain particular demographics of ages and individuals and demographics, and that persona, we hit them with testimonials. We hit them with our ESG strategy. We hit them with what it means to work in an ERG. We hit them with what our diversity strategy looked like. And all the while, hey, at the end of the day, we're feeding the world. That's pretty exciting. You want to come work with us? Which totally changed the game in terms of employee value proposition. All the while doing all the other things, walk-in Wednesdays of having people come into our events, but a lot of high-touch, face-to-face personal interaction because people do have a lot of choices, and we want to be their number one choice. So that was a huge game changer for us this year in terms of our recruiting approach. Did that help?
Yes. Thank you. And you answered many of my questions as well, so thank you. You got a perspective on the panel in terms, again, of their hiring, how the economy and labor market impacted their hiring. Kelly talked about strategy. My next question, I'm going to ask 2 different questions for the other panelists, and to Rob specifically because he's been on different webinars with us, and we know that his company works with multiple RPOs. So my question is, with respect to RPO specifically, you listened to Ben earlier, Rob, in terms of the value proposition for, the evolving value proposition, I would say, for RPO. What would you say resonated with you, and what were you surprised by? In particular for your company, where are you finding that value from your RPO partners?
Great. Thanks for the question, Limaze. I think what really resonated was the fact that, okay, so we have a 3-year transformation strategy, and there's a finite period of time. We know when the end date is. And we talked about the lack of proper forecasting and being able to scale at pace. Typical corporate recruiting environments don't have a lot of flexibility in that regard. Not only do you may not have the team to scale up, but also it takes a significant amount of time to ramp the team up to be truly productive. So we opted to partner with a couple different RPOs in India and Manila in particular, wherein your notice period as well, in addition to the ramp-up time, can be as long as 90 days before the candidate actually starts, which can include your recruiting team. And so, we have that 3-year recruitment transformation strategy. Forecasting is better in our instance, but still it's not perfect. And so if we're not getting the numbers soon enough, it's going to be very difficult for us to scale. Having the RPOs signed up and ready to go, we're able to just tap them on the shoulder and say, go. And so that's been very, very helpful for us. And it's good to see that that came out, and I think in some of the research that we saw. I think what was surprising, and we haven't been able to link it just yet, but maybe we will at some point and be able to help Ben verify that, is if in fact we've been able to significantly increase revenue as a result of that strategy. We're not there yet. We do have about a year and a half left in our transformation strategy.
Follow-up for you, Rob, in terms of what resonated and what surprised you. Ben mentioned that RPO companies that report more frequently to their clients see higher satisfaction. I'm curious, is that the case? Is that something that you also agree, resonate with?
Yes, definitely. And each relationship is a little bit different. And we also recognize the first few months, even the first year of an implementation is never seamless. But it's been actually quite successful in some of our key markets. North America was a little bit different. We're now in our second year of that partnership, and we have seen a significant difference. So the survey results from managers, from candidates, has been very, very positive.
Thank you. And I'm going to turn to our recruiting master here, because metrics. Yes, because I know you love recruiting metrics. The question for you, Trent, is what recruiting metrics were you watching this year, and what did they tell you, and how these metrics guided your hiring, if you will?
All right, so it's not time to fill. I hate it. I think it's a stupid metric, so let's just go ahead and take that one off. So I do recruiting just a little bit different. In sprint recruiting, I don't care if we have 4,000 open jobs or 1,000. We do it in 2-week sprints. We make the client assign a prioritization, like we give them 500 points. You need to assign a priority on it. And then we also manage the number or limit the number of candidates that we have in each stage. So those are the 3 metrics that I'm absolutely obsessed with, almost down to the day. So I know that on day 3, day 4, day 7 and 8 of the sprint, those are when the most offers go out. So if I need to meet with my team, it's not on one of those days. If there's a company meeting, I try to push it back to not one of those days. I want them to get those offers out. So that comes from just reading a baseline over time of knowing once we actually get the prioritization, we know, all right, this is, day 4, we should have offers going out. And if they're not, then my eyebrow raises. And in our daily stand-up, I'm asking, what's going on? Is it candidate flow? Is it our recruitment marketing? Do we need to spend more money on this particular job? So that's number 1. Number 2, I also look at the number of candidates in each stage and how long they stay there. So we have WIP limits. Once we hit a WIP limit or a work in progress limit on a hiring manager submitted, if it sits there for longer than 48 hours, that violates one of the SLAs that we have with our clients. So I get involved. Hour 49, I'm emailing the client going, you've had 2 days, we submitted 5 resumes, you're not getting any more until we get feedback on the 5 that we already have. And what that does is that gets rid of that FOMO, or kind of plays in our favor. They want more candidates, so they give us feedback. Our search gets better. So if a particular job, especially if it's assigned a point value, that means that it's incredibly important. If that thing sits longer than 3 or 4 days, then I am all over the recruiter, I'm all over the client, I'm all over our client success, going, why am I wasting resources on this? And I'll ICE the position, which ICE stands for I've called and cared enough. And we let the client know we're not working on this until we get some feedback. The other thing that I look at is average day open. I don't like to look at the time to fill because it's a lagging measure. I can't manage to that. It's already happened. Average days open, I can, because especially if I'm looking at, let's look at a sales division because it's easy. if we've got 60% of our sales roles are less than 15 days, I'm okay. I mean, it's less than 30. It's not really going to have a great impact on our revenue bottom line. But if that 60% is 45 days or 90 days over, I'm extremely concerned. Because then I need to look at how do I retool the organization? What sourcing, what marketing do I need to pull? Or do I need to get involved and just roll up my sleeves and start helping recruit some of the sales things? So those are some of the recruiting metrics that I look at almost daily. We cover it in our stand-up. Everybody in the recruiting organization knows where they stand. Our clients know where they stand. And more importantly, our candidates for those high priority roles, they know where they stand, because the recruiters do not work on anything else until we get those high priority roles in order accomplished. So it gives them time to really kind of dig in and build those relationships and close the loop, let candidates know where they stand in the process. So it's increased our scores. The new hire survey last year was probably 8.2 out of 10. Our NPS right now hovers in around 9.97. And a lot of that is because that was about the time that I was able to implement Sprint in this organization. And immediately we started seeing higher candidate scores because the recruiters were able to slow down, focus, and enhance that candidate experience. The other stuff that I look at is all the stuff that Daniel stole my thunder from. You know, I look at the number of job openings. I look at the workforce participation. Especially the one that he pointed out today about the demand in software development and the rates in software development was like very key for me. So that website he shared, I will be all over probably on the plane.
Talking about metrics, I love the end of the year when you get to reflect and look at learned lessons, what worked, what did not work. So that leads into my next question to the panelists, and I'll ask for takers. I'm not going to name who take this question first, but it's same for the three panelists. I'm going to ask you to, as you reflect on your journey this year, what are your top learned lessons that you like to share?
I heard that. Lessons learned. I think from a Lineage perspective, our lessons learned were everything we do is wrapped around continuous improvement. We have a lean methodology. We work in a 7-step environment, so it's constantly looking at how can you change, how can you evolve, how can you be different, how can you innovate. This year, from a trends and what I think back about in terms of lessons learned, it was really around the fail fast mentality. So try it, see how it's going. If it's not working, abort ship and try something else. For us, that worked really well and helped us figure out these are the 25 things we're doing, and here's where we have a gap, and now we need to build a strategy for that. So as an example, our maintenance, engineering roles are really hard to fill. They're people that are working in really hazardous conditions. It's not the best environment to work in. And so how do we develop a program that solves for that? And so we've poured our resources and our energy into a gap versus trying to just keep throwing issues and problems at it. We've also developed at Lineage and our TA team cornerstones. So always be learning, focus on relationship, whether it's the candidate relationship, the hiring manager relationship. How do you measure that? So candidate experience, how do you measure the relationship you have with your hiring managers that we all think is great and they think is bad or good? And the big one for us is adapt and evolve. We're all going to continue to see the crystal ball's getting smashed for what we think is going to happen. And so we do an innovation lab quarterly within the team. So every single one of the leaders, the directors, the managers, the leads, they come forward with, here is my biggest, boldest, and brightest idea. And we go through a pitch deck session, and we rate it on a benefit analysis chart, and then essentially that's one of our strategic initiatives for 2024. And then if it fails, guess what? We've got 25 other ideas in the hat that we can pull out. So to everyone in the room, it's, be innovative, try new things, and fail fast.
Sure, thanks. I would say that our biggest lesson learned was probably just the need to continuously to be agile. I would say that, and we did predict this in all honesty. I mentioned we're going through a transformation program which includes a lot of offshoring activities. Some of the software developers, for example, are no longer being hired necessarily here as they resign. We're now hiring them in Manila, India, et cetera. However, we do continue to have a structure wherein the onshore managers are still very involved, and of course they want to be involved in those hiring decisions. But when you're looking to scale hundreds, it's very difficult for them to actually be able to interview all of those candidates, not only because of time zone differences, but you become an interviewing machine. When, over the course of 3 to 4 months, you're going to be interviewing 12 candidates a day. As a hiring manager, it is very difficult to accomplish and clearly impossible to accomplish. So, of course, you want to support the business, enable them, and so we did test it out because this is what they wanted to do, and it wasn't successful. They quickly realized that because they had interview fatigue, and so we were able to shift gears after really just about 3 or 4 weeks, and they followed our recommendation to make sure that we had people onshore. They did talk about traveling over to our offshore locations, of course, but again, that would be difficult for them to do and for an extended period of time. So we trained up a number of people within our offshore locations to be able to make those hiring decisions so that we can run sprint-type recruitment methodologies as well, so that we did have our ability to move at pace.
And Trent, how about you, some of your learned lessons?
I didn't learn anything. Kelly took my answer again. Iterate to improve. I should have gone first this time. The other thing is, I think something that I relearned, and Kelly actually mentioned it a little bit earlier, is never sacrifice speed for quality or quality for speed. The whole instance where I was talking about, the candidate experience, I think that was a big aha. Just that data point in itself was a huge aha. The other aha was that our retention is incredible as a result of that. Like, conceptually, I always knew that we were gatekeepers. I always tell recruiters, think of yourself as Gandalf, you shall not pass. It's our job to make sure that we're bringing the right people in the organization, but seeing it statistically just really kind of confirmed what the gut was saying. The other piece is, looking at the voluntary, kind of staying in that same line of thought. Our voluntary turnover last year, I just pulled this, it was 36%. Anyone want to guess? Now that we've got higher candidate experience, we have higher quality, we really honed in on it. Anyone want to guess what our voluntary turnover is to date? 20. Lower? 15. Lower? 6. I ran the number 4 times over the weekend going, this cannot be right. But again, that to me was like, holy shit, 20 years, I've never stopped to say we've got to focus on the quality. And then for us to be able, as an organization, to be able to say we have 98.5% retention in tech is unheard of. So it gives us a differentiator from a competitive standpoint as well.
No, fantastic, and kudos to you. Great lessons. Thank you for sharing those. The next question is, Kelly, you said smashing the crystal ball, not something you want to look at, but I'm going to go there and ask about outlook. A lot of us want to think ahead and think about what to expect next year. So my question for you, thinking about the upcoming year, what are some of the things that you are excited about, some of the things that you are concerned about? Trent, giving you the option to go first. All right.
You're not reading my notes this time, sis. All right, Gen AI. I already talked about it earlier. I think everyone's going to double down on it next year. So for organizations, it's how do we do that great reskilling? But I think for recruiters, it starts with us. We need to look at how do we use AI. And whenever I say AI, it's not artificial intelligence. It's augmented intelligence, all right? So I love to use the metaphor of Iron Man. Tony Stark, he's a badass, he's handsome, he's rich, great business guy. He's a badass all by himself, but whenever he puts on that AI suit, then he becomes a superhero. I think for all of recruiting, we're going to have to look at all of our teams and say, how do we make them Iron Men and women, right? Introduce Gen AI to them, find ways to do it, and believe it or not, I would probably venture to say 60% of them will just be headlong into it. We started this earlier this year. I've got 3 or 4 recruiters that I'm constantly going, what have you learned? This is what I've learned. We swap tools, we swap ideas. They use it for candidate outreach. They use it to go, post something in a ChatGPT and say, look at this LinkedIn profile, tell me the top 5 experiences they have and give me 5 interview questions. Who would have thought a year ago that we'd be able to do that, right? over half the time, especially in tech, because I don't know what the heck some of this stuff is. I'm like, give me 5 questions and give me the answer so that way I know, are they good? Now I've got something in there and I can go to the hiring manager and look like I actually know what the hell I'm talking about, right? So it's just simple things like that that will, I think, increase recruiter satisfaction. The biggest thing that I'm concerned about right now is recruiter morale. They have been beaten to hell and back. So we need to leverage Gen AI as a way to say, let me teach you how to work smarter, not necessarily harder, and then also give us an opportunity, even as leaders, incorporate it so that way we can spend more time loving on our team, because they deserve it.
That was really good. That was really good. If you haven't read Trent's techniques on AI, I would highly recommend using them. I use them all the time, actually. I have found and done like a real-time demonstration where I say thank you to someone my own way, and then I use Trent's way using AI, and it's way better. So, but it is scary, though, actually. I think having guiding principles around AI is really important, too. How are you going to use it with your organization? Are you going to use it just to write LinkedIn posts, or are you going to use it for more of a comprehensive scheduling tool? Like, what are some of those guiding principles? I think as organizations, we need to be thoughtful about that, rather than trying to throw the kitchen sink at it. From a Lineage perspective, our approach is really around DE&I and how that's not going to be just a check-the-box mentality. How do we weave that into what we do? So how do we take our employment resource groups and tie them into our DE&I strategy? How do we make sure from a talent acquisition perspective that we have ambassadors for every one of those ERG groups that are filtering and funneling and sharing information about what the TA team is doing that coincides with what are some of those continuous improvement ideas and projects and programs that the ERGs are coming up with that the TA team can feed and funnel? So I think from our perspective, we've let a lot of other things fall down, I think, as an organization, because we've been so concerned with filling our roles and filling positions, and now we just need to go back to the basics of we call them moments that matter. So learning really what's important to people. What's important to me might be very different than someone on the front line. So for us, we've developed different career paths for people so they can see, hey, after 6 months, here's what you should be thinking about, and here's where you should be going, and here's how to do that. Here are some of the tools and the skills and the techniques that you need in order to be promoted. So skilling, DE&I, and then really tying your TA strategy to your employment resource groups and making sure everyone's aligned and excited and behind your mission.
We're going to hear about AI later in the conference with the closing session tomorrow. The last question, again for Rob, looking at next year, what are some of the things you're excited about, you're concerned about in terms of hiring?
Sure. So a big focus is obviously going to be continued success in our transformation strategy. There's a limited period of time, so we want to make sure we execute upon that. But secondly, also, we want to make sure that we have the right pre-onboarding and onboarding when you're hiring, but in the thousands. We want to make sure we have the infrastructure in place to retain this talent, and that we are delivering upon our employee promise, our value proposition. We've invested quite significantly in recruitment marketing campaigns, in getting recruiters the right talking notes, et cetera, to be able to talk about what a career is like at WTW. And so it would be very disappointing if it became a revolving door wherein we'd have to replace people that we've hired. We have planned to overhire, of course, because we do anticipate there will be some healthy attrition that will come with that. But we do want to make sure that we have the right leaders in place, good managers who are having great conversations with their new hires, so that we can continue to have success in our program, but obviously run the business as best we can.
All right, so I want to thank all of our panelists, Rob Neverett, Kelly Burledge, and Trent Cotton. Thank you very much for a great session.